everybody, and welcome back. I'm Denisha Christensen, your host of You Know How This Ends, the podcast where I hope that every time you listen to it, you are reminded of who you are, whose you are, and that the only thing you have to do to get your goals and dreams is just to not give up and keep going. And I'm so honored and so grateful to have my dear friend, business partner, and mentor, the amazing Mitch Nelson, joining me today. Hello, Mitch.
Hey, Denisha, happy to be here. Thanks for the invite.
Oh my gosh, I know you have a crazy full schedule with a million different things going on, and so just super grateful for you taking the time to be on and to share something really important with my listeners.
Let's do it. I'm
Let's
honored.
do it. Let's do it, right? Thank you. So, Mitch, oh my gosh, we could spend the whole podcast just talking about how amazing Mitch is. I'm gonna let you, will you take just a minute and kind of introduce yourself and give a little bit of your background and stuff, Mitch, for a lot of
Yeah.
people that listen will already know you, but we have a lot of new people that won't.
Yeah, absolutely. So just a little backstory. So I've been doing real estate investing for 12 years. I started January of 2013, bought my first deal in July. Maybe it was before that, July of 2013, I want to say, but it's been 12 years now that I've been doing
Gosh,
this.
wow, exactly,
Um,
yeah.
And what led me to it, I mean, obviously, all of us know that there's money to be made in real estate investing, but really what led me to real estate investing was I remember I was 26 years old. I was about to turn 27, and I was having that moment where you're rounding the corner on a decade, right?
Mhm.
Like you're
Big life
going from your
turn.
mid 20s to your late 20s. This happens to me every decade, right? It happened in my 30s, going from mid 30s to late 30s. I'm like, oh, what have I done with this decade?
Mhm.
Luckily my 30s, I've hit more of my goals than I did at that point in my 20s, and that was really kind of an eye-opening moment for me. I had set some lofty goals. I wanted to be a millionaire by the time I was 30, and I said that when I was 20.
Which
And
I think there's a lot of people, right? Oh yeah, I want to be a millionaire
yeah,
by
we
the
all
time
do
I'm
that.
25, 30, 35, 40, 50, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I wasn't that. I was working at the Apple store at 26. I was slinging iPhones, working retail, making like 40 grand a year, which in 2011 was average American income, right? So I was average. I wasn't a millionaire or anywhere close to being a millionaire. I didn't know any millionaires. I didn't, I had no idea what you had to do to become one because I had only received my public education, which was it teaches us to be average.
Get a job. You were doing the things that your public education taught you, right? You had a
Yeah.
job.
Yep. I got a job. I was banking like they taught me to bank. I was paying my taxes like they taught me how to pay taxes. I was doing all the things that I thought I was supposed to do because that's all I had been taught to that point. Not really realizing the light bulb didn't really go off until that moment. It was right before my 27th birthday where I was like, gosh, what I was taught isn't helping me hit my goals. All it did was make me average. Right? So I started studying wealthy people. Like I just started reading books and like watching documentaries and just anything I could find. It was kind of like this addiction that I got. Like I just want to learn about,
Yes.
successful people and what
Yes.
I want to get inside their brain
Yeah.
and I read, gosh, so many books, but one that really kind of changed my mindset was Rich Dad Poor Dad. And it's funny because
Classic,
a lot
right?
of a lot of people, a lot of successful people that I've met have that same story where it's like I read this book, Rich Dad Poor Dad. It's a great book, fantastic book, but he talked about real estate and how that can be, and how the wealthier business owners and the real estate investors and it just kind of it led me down that path. And here I
And
am
what I
12 years
love,
later.
and here we are, 12 years later, right? And what I love about you and your story, Mitch, is you took that, you were like, oh crap, I'm almost 30, 3 years away. And then you took action, you did something with it. And a lot of people will be like, oh, well, I don't know how, like, guess it's not going to work out. Maybe I'll reset that and I'll be a millionaire by the time I'm 40 or something,
Yeah. You just keep pushing it back.
Keep pushing it back and be like, oh, like, later type of a thing, which I've been guilty of on many occasions, right? Oh, yeah, later when life slows down or when I don't have so much going on, we'll figure that out. But later
That's a
comes.
very common thing. People push back, they keep pushing back their dreams. Another common thing that people do is, we go into life, just like you said, all of us do that where we set big goals, we have big dreams, and rather than expanding our means to meet our dreams, most people shrink their dreams to meet their means, right? And that's just I don't know. It
That's
doesn't
sad.
excite me as much as expanding my means does to meet
It's
my
really
dreams, you know?
sad. And
Yeah,
when you really think about it, it's sad, right? That we're shrinking our dreams to fit what we feel is possible
yeah.
instead of expanding our possibilities and even making our dreams even bigger, right? And that's what I've loved about my connection with you and your beautiful wife, Maylee, and what you both have brought into my life this over just almost a year now, or a little over a year now, is not only are we now have the how for how we're going to achieve our dreams, but even expanding our dreams beyond what we were thinking was possible at the time. So, so, so grateful to have you and Maylee in my life. Feel so, so blessed. And
Well,
that's
likewise.
why,
Well
thank
said.
you. Thank you. You're so kind. And that's what I wanted to bring you on to talk about today is one of the tools that we have and that we teach in our real estate education program that we work on together is how to find the how, which in most cases, for most people, is the money, right? It's like we can dream all day long. And if we have, everyone's like, well, if I just had the money to do it, right, then 100% I'd be on it. But it's that money piece that being in a physical world, we require physical resources. And that's something, with my background in feminine energy, what I learned and and again what I loved about when I finally connected with you because my background was well my previous background was just work really hard. Just work really hard and save as much as you can and eventually you'll make it, right? Like we all know how that goes. And then my next phase was you just have to be. You just have to embody the energy. You have to be in this beautiful feminine energy of receiving and it will all come to you. But what I found most often is what comes to you is the people and the opportunities and the education so then you can then take action. And that's what you and Maylee were to me in this whole education program is you're the people, you're the education, you're the how of what to now do to have the goals, right? So I received, and that's the whole be, do, have, right? You have to be in that place, you have to embody that energy, then you have to do the actions. And that's a piece that I want to talk about today with you is one of the action steps, which is called velocity banking. And I didn't realize, Maylee just told me yesterday, you actually coined that term,
I
velocity
did.
banking.
Yeah.
I did not know that. Hello.
Yeah.
So cool. So, so cool. So Mitch is an expert at velocity banking, and I'm gonna let him explain it to you because he does a much more concise job of doing it than I do at this point. So dive in, Mitch, and tell us a little bit about what the whole concept of velocity banking is and why it works.
Yeah. Well, I think I'm going to start a little broader and
Okay,
kind of and
love
zoom
it.
into it because like I mentioned earlier, everything we're taught is designed to keep us average, right? I mean, at the end
So
of the day,
true.
99% of people need to be worker ants, right? And that just keeps the economy going. And that's how it's all structured and that's how it works. The beautiful thing about the country we live in is we can choose not to be worker ants. We can choose to be the queen ant, right? We can choose to be whatever we want to be. That is the beautiful thing about America.
And
Um,
if you're here listening to this podcast, you probably don't want to be a worker ant. You don't
right.
want to be a worker bee.
Yeah,
You want to be the king. You want to be the queen, right? That's why you're
yeah,
drawn to this podcast and what I teach and share here. So
yep.
we're talking to the right crowd of people who don't want to be a worker ant anymore.
That's right. And there's so much opportunity, and really all it takes is knowledge. And there is a weird there's a weird thing until you really come to the realization that everything is figure outable, everything is learnable. Um, the you're kind of stuck thinking, oh, well, I wasn't born with that information. I wasn't raised with that information. I don't have access to that information. Yes, you do. Everybody does. It just takes putting in the work to find it and to get it, right? And
Yeah.
making the sacrifice. Hey, turn off Netflix and read a book, right?
Yeah.
Like it takes a sacrifice to be able to do the things you want to do.
And
Um,
that's what you found when you were studying all the wealthy and successful people in that time of your life. All these people, most of them didn't start out wealthy with family money. You know what I mean? They figured it out.
yeah, yeah, and
The whole
that's
American
the
spirit, the American dream, right? We're recording this
yeah.
just before 4th of July. It's going to come out, that's what we're here to embody, and that's why we're here.
That's right. And one of the most common things I hear people say is, "Oh, well, I wasn't lucky enough to be born into money." A very small percentage of wealthy people are old money. Most Americans that are millionaires are self-made millionaires. which means that they weren't born into money either, right?
Yep.
They learned how to figure it out.
Yep.
And one of those first steps is a shift in mindset and a shift in the way we think about things. Because literally everything that we were taught around money, from how to make it to how to manage it to how to save it to all the things, is designed to keep you that average person. And so if we can relearn and reprogram all of those points, the hundreds of points around money that and how we interact with money in our daily lives, it's gonna change your results. And that's true of how we make it. That's true, with having a job versus being a business owner or an investor of some kind. That's
Right.
true of how we pay our taxes. The way you were taught to pay taxes is the most expensive way to pay taxes. Of course it is. The government funded your education, and when you pay taxes, you pay the government. They're going to teach you how to give them the most money,
As
right?
much as
So,
possible. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, this is logical, and you can't blame them for that. You'd do it too,
That's
right?
their job. Yeah. Yeah. That's their
Yeah.
job.
Uh, and so, stop playing the blame game and just learn the better way. And what we're here to talk about today is banking. The way we were all taught to bank is designed to keep you broke. And if you just step back and really think about it, first thing to understand is the bank is not a nonprofit organization here for your financial betterment. They're
What?
a business. They're a business. I mean, it sounds really like, well, duh, to say it out loud, right? But like a lot of people don't think of their relationship with the bank as like I'm their customer and their job is to make money off of me, right? So we go in and we talk to the loan officers. They're really just salespeople, right?
I
We go
know.
in and we talk to the loan officers. We're like, which product should I get to do this thing? And we somehow think that the thing that they tell us, they're telling us because it's best for us. Well, it might be good for you, but that's not their primary goal. Sure, you want a car and you go into a bank and you're like, what should I do? And they're like, get a car loan. That's going to get you a car. So it'll help you. But
To solve their problem
the car
in the way that
loan,
makes the most money for the bank.
yeah, but the car loan's going to make it's the most expensive way for you to buy a
Yep.
car at that bank, right? Like, so, it really, banking is designed to take most of your money and to give most of your money to the bank as much as they can possibly get from you. And that's something that the people just aren't aware of because they were never told. But now you're no longer uninformed. Congratulations.
Woohoo! You're
Um,
welcome.
you're welcome. And something interesting, if you notice, if you talk to any average person, and probably a lot of the people listening to this podcast, we were kind of programmed to shop banking products based on interest rates.
Yes, I know I was.
This rate and
Uh,
that rate, and I got this rate, and they're like married to the idea that the interest rate is what's going to make or break them, and that's just simply not true. Partially because the interest rate isn't all the information. What a lot of people don't realize is there's three. It's like and I use this example often in my workshops, but it's like if I was like, Denisha, 32 degrees is the freezing point of water, right?
right. Yeah.
Celsius.
Uh, well, no.
No,
No, it's not.
32 degrees Celsius is actually a very hot day. So what that analogy represents is there's different scales that just like there's different scales that you can measure distance, there's different scales that you can measure temperature, Fahrenheit and Celsius. There's different scales that you can measure interest. And we've heard of all of them. The most expensive way to pay interest is compound interest. And I'll tell you, if you have a student loan that's in deferment, you're paying compound interest. That's not a good thing.
Yikes.
If but the second and the one the bank loves because they make a ton of money on it is the second most expensive scale of interest, which is amortized interest. And the cheapest form is actually the one they try to scare us away from, which is simple interest. If you have anything called a loan, like a mortgage loan or a car loan or a student loan that you're making monthly payments on, you're paying amortized interest. Loans are amortized interest. So that means that number that you're looking at is not what you think it is. It's actually a completely different scale that you probably haven't been trained on. And then the cheapest form of interest is simple interest, which is how we were taught to calculate interest in high school. It's the simple formula of calculating interest. It's also cheaper than amortized or compound interest. And so
So
you
let's
can't compare those numbers straight across. It's like saying, it's like taking a Fahrenheit temperature and a Celsius temperature and being like, oh, this one's hotter or colder without doing the math. You can't compare them straight across. They're not apples
yeah.
and apples.
So
So
let's give for our listeners, let's give them a couple examples of like the different types of interest. So amortize, if I can use an example from mine, when we bought our home 10 years ago, we bought it for $200,000. And when we got the statement from the mortgage company, the what's that called again?
amortization.
Your amortization calculator, right, of how long it'll take us to pay it off and what the payments all look like. When I looked at 30-year loan, right, like average, and when I looked at it, the total that we would be paying off over those 30 years was just over 400,000. It was like almost a half a million. And I remember looking at my husband and I said,
What was your interest rate?
well, I looked at my husband and I said, this is not a $500,000 home. Like I was so ticked off. I'm like, if I want to spend $500,000 on a home, it's not this one, right? This is
Right.
not a $500,000 home. Like what the
Yeah.
crap? Our interest rate was like 4%.
So
So how in
four,
the world is a 4%, maybe five? I can't remember now because we have it all differently now. But I remember thinking, how in the world is a 4 or 5% interest rate more than double? That doesn't make any sense at all,
yeah.
right?
Yep, it's amortization, right?
That's
It's
an
because
amortization
they're
calculator.
stretching you out. So that's 4%. But what we don't think about is it's 4% annually. And if we stretch that out over 30 years, then yeah, it's like double.
Yeah.
It's, and 6% is like triple, and 7% and 8% is like quadruple, right?
So where we're at right
And
now, right? So you're gonna pay quadruple for
yeah.
your home. Yeah.
Yeah,
You're
so
right now.
what really kills you is the amortization, and yet the bank really loves pushing those amortized products because they're safer for them and they're riskier for you. There's not as much flexibility in those products. There's like for example with a mortgage, you don't have access to the equity if there's an emergency or there's you know like even the
Wow.
principal portion of your payments, it still disappears from your
Mm-hmm.
cash flow every month.
Mm-hmm.
You can't like go swipe your mortgage statement to buy groceries, right? So,
Nope.
um,
Sure
so
can't.
so it's draining uh the way amortization works and the way loans work, it drains you monthly. If you add up one of the epiphanies I have when I work with people and coach with people one-on-one about this strategy, velocity banking is them realizing how much of their income just disappears to loan payments, just to service debt
Yep.
every month. It's a huge amount that just disappears. And we weren't trained that well around the other products. The most we were trained that we can have credit cards and we can have HELOCs and lines of credit. We weren't told that simple interest it can be less expensive for us if we use it right. Uh,
Yes.
but but we were also told that they're scary and you shouldn't use them.
Yep.
Stay away from them.
When we first got married, we were going to Italy for, I had been accepted to an opera program over there, and we were going over for me to go to school. And we'd got some money, we'd got some money from wedding gifts and everything, and we were at that school in this little town in Italy, which was amazing for about a month. And then we had planned a trip, a week to travel around and see the rest of Italy while we were there before we came back to Idaho. And that whole we spent everything that we had gotten as a wedding present during that month. And we had gotten a couple credit cards, just in case. But all this advice we were getting before we got married was don't go into debt, don't use your credit cards, all this stuff, right? And I remember that week where we were touring around, it was like we lived in fear every single day because we were putting everything on the credit card and we were terrified because that, like you said, you are trained. Don't use credit cards. Don't use credit. Like that is get a loan. Get a loan. It's safer. It's better for you. But it's actually the opposite is actually true.
Safer for the bank.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
So
And the yeah, that's absolutely true. They don't tell us why. They just tell us that it'll hurt us, right? Here's the thing. All the products at the bank, they're tools. That they're tools that you can use for different reasons. The reason we don't leave our power tools just lying around the house plugged in if we got little kids running around is because the little kids are going to hurt themselves on the
yep.
tools,
Yep.
right? Does that make a tool bad or
No.
evil? Doesn't make it doesn't make the tool bad. We have the tool for a reason, right? You're not going to leave a chainsaw in the baby's room. Like they're going to hurt themselves and they don't know how to use it. But why do you have a chainsaw in the first place? Well, to cut a tree down. It's way easier than trying to judo chop the tree, right? You're going to cut down the tree way faster
Talk
because
about hurting yourself.
you have a tool. And that tool makes you really efficient at doing a thing. And so just like a power tool isn't inherently good or bad. It's just a tool. It's the user that makes it good or
Yes.
bad, right? And it comes down to the knowledge of the user. Little kids don't know how to use tools. That's why they're probably hurt themselves with them.
Yeah.
But
This
adults
is, go
know
ahead.
how to use tools
Yeah.
and use them to get work done faster. That's why we have them. Debt is a tool. A line of credit, for example, is a tool. Can it hurt you? Absolutely, it can, especially if you don't know what you're doing. And the average person did not get trained on how to appropriately use a line of credit.
So they were
Um,
taught to use a loan because it's safer. You're not going to hurt yourself. So
yep,
that's like an axe, right? Instead of judo chopping, let's go
yeah,
use an axe. But again, that's a slower, less efficient way than using a chainsaw.
yep. But objectively, the loan actually okay. So what I mean by objectively, subjectively, if you're uneducated with lines of credit, yeah, probably safer a loan. But objectively, knowing the knowledge that you can have around banking products, the line of credit's safer. Because you can access, as long as you don't leave it maxed out, right? And this is what velocity banking strategy is all about. You can access capital at any time. So if you've got a slow month in your business, velocity banking is great for business owners because you don't have to make rigid payments on the same day every month, right? You can access it, and if you do have a slow month and need some capital, you can reach into the line of credit, pull the capital out, and use that to service the debt. I don't recommend doing that all the time. That's not, but it's there if there's an emergency. Like lines of credit are great for that. It's better if you're educated and you understand how to use that tool, you are safer, especially in industries like, if you make commission, you're a commission-based job, or if you're a business owner where, we don't get the
Up
same
and
number
down
on our
week to month.
paycheck
Yep.
on a
Yep.
consistent
Exactly.
every 2 weeks kind of thing. It's
Yeah.
a roller coaster. It's up and down. So yeah,
100%.
it is objectively a safer tool if you know how to use it.
So before we jump into the logistics of this, I want to share on my side, my experience with velocity banking is that we were taught, and one of the favorite things that I learned from you, Mitch, favorite quote that you always say is when knowledge increases, behavior changes, right? When you have it more information, and it's so interesting because as I talk with people about this or about investing or even just like, my feminine energy work in general, we just don't know, and we don't know what we don't know, and we're just doing the best we have with what we know at the time. But then when you know better, now you get the opportunity to do better, and that's where you get to change your life because since your knowledge is increasing, your behavior gets to change. So it's the B is the knowledge increasing, right? The do, now your actions can change, your behavior can change, so that now you can have the lifestyle that you want, the goals, the dreams, the desires, all of that, right? And that's literally what and why I feel so passionate about it and love sharing it with people is because that's literally what it did for Dave and I. My business last summer was at a point where I had brought on people to support me in my business. I had my admin team, I had VAs and assistant coaches and stuff, but we weren't consistently bringing in the revenue for me to pay all my people and continue to grow and market and all these things, right? And so every single month was just like, oh no, I never can make it. And I felt this pressure to perform, a pressure to like all these things to make things work. And it was really, really stressful. So when we incorporated the velocity banking technique that Mitch is just going to be teaching about here in just a second, what it did, exactly what you said, on those slower months, it allowed me to pull from that resource from our HELOC and use that to float the business. And then the next month we got a $20,000 coaching client. And it was like, okay, now we can pay that back. Now we, and just for me, it really released that pressure of the push, the hustle, the grind, and allowed me to be in that receiving mode that as women, we are meant to be in. So I love this tool, this resource for business owners, because like Mitch was saying, it can be a very up and down thing, especially when you're first starting out. And this allowed there to be some cushion to feel like I had some support and allow me to be in my fun, magical energy of drawing people in instead of the hustle and the pressure and the push that then just hustled and pressured and pushed everybody away, right? So absolutely, absolutely magical for those of you women and business owners who are listening. So super, super, like I said, it changed my life. And I was like, we got to bring Mitch on here to teach more about it. So now we've kind of done the overview of what it is and why. Will you share a little bit about, I mean, we don't want to go too far into it with, because there's
Yeah.
a lot to it, right? But share kind
Yeah.
of a
This
little
is
bit of the
just
hows behind it.
an
Yeah.
intro to the concept, right?
Yes.
Well, there's two basic principles of velocity banking. So understanding and there's, if you want to know more, I'm sure Denisha has resources she can share with you. So definitely reach out to her to go deeper on this stuff, recognizing that this is just kind of surface level. But going back to kind of what I said earlier, what we were taught to do in banking is the most expensive way to bank. So, and that's how every average person banks. So wealthy people don't become wealthy by doing average people things.
No,
In
sir.
a lot of cases, they do the opposite of what the average person is doing, right? So where the average person is, we talked about how simple interest is cheaper than amortized interest. We won't get into that math here, but there is math behind it that I'd love to share with you. Reach out to Tanisha.
Yeah.
But so just understanding that simple interest is cheaper, you know, a lot of average people refinance their amortized mortgages to pay off their credit cards. Well, what just happened is they just traded simple interest debt, cheaper debt, for more expensive amortized interest debt that they'll end up paying double, triple, quadruple on. And
No.
so don't do that. The wealthy are doing the opposite. They're actually consolidating their debt into lines of credit. They're not consolidating their debt into loans. They consolidate their debt into lines of credit. And
This blew
um,
my mind when I first learned about it. I was like, what?
yeah,
And
yeah,
why,
because it's
why
simple
are we
interest.
really learning about this?
Yeah. And it's simple interest, and we have more flexibility with that account than with a loan, which allows us to do the other side of velocity banking, which I'll get to in a second. But what a lot of my students do is they replace their mortgages with HELOCs. They instead of not even like a second position, get a HELOC, right? Once they learn all these principles and they understand the math of what drives this, they're actually refinancing their entire mortgage into a full HELOC, right? So if you have got a $200,000 house with a $100,000 balance on your mortgage, they're taking that and they're refinancing, getting a $200,000 line of credit with an opening balance of 200,000, paying off the mortgage. But here's the cool thing. What happens to the mortgage payment when you do that? It
Oh,
goes
it's
away,
gone.
which means your cash flow goes up. And I know you're saying, well, wait, there's going to be a HELOC payment, right?
And that's literally the
Um,
question I get across the board
yeah.
is like, well, but then now I have to make my HELOC payments. But surprise.
So here's the solution. Stop using your checking account. Literally just use your HELOC because it works just
Have
like a
good
checking
checking.
account does.
Yep.
Right? Think about this. If you got $100,000 balance, you got 200 grand opening up, a $200,000 line with a $100,000 balance, you got 100 grand in available that now we treat as savings. It's for assets or emergencies. We're not going to go buy a boat or something stupid. Like use your discipline. That's savings. That's money that you can use for if a rental property pops up, or if we need new tires on the car all of a sudden, right? Like that's what it's for. But when you put your whole income on top of your debt and in a line of credit, that drops the balance by your entire income. So it opens up the room of your income inside the HELOC, which means you can spend it. You can now treat the HELOC like it's your checking account, stay on your budget, right? But it also acts as the payment. When you get paid, just push that into the HELOC.
Yep.
Now there's no payment in the HELOC because you, by the act of depositing your income every 2 weeks or whenever it is, or if you're a business owner, whenever you get paid, deposit it into the HELOC. That counts as the payment. So now there's no payment if you're consistent with that. It's dropping your debt balance by your full income, which means the money that you are being charged interest on is less than it would be because your debt balance has gone down. And when you are charged interest, the amount you are being charged on is simple interest now, not amortized interest. And then, your daily activity, all that changes is the card you pull out of your wallet. Most people access their checking accounts with a debit card. Well, it has 16 digits, a magnetic stripe, a little chip on it. Just switch to your HELOC card. It has 16 digits, a magnetic stripe, and a little chip on it, right? You can buy groceries with it, and you can buy gas with it, and you can do all the things, pay for Netflix. just your line of credit now is your checking account.
This
And,
is what I do. This is what you do, right? Like this is exactly what we do ourselves.
yep,
Yeah.
yep. And it's amazing how fast that debt melts away. Because you're deflate for all the reasons I just mentioned. You're deflating the principal balance there by being charged less interest. The interest rate doesn't matter there, right? It doesn't matter. I am being charged less interest on less money every single month. I eliminated by consolidating my debt, I eliminated all my monthly payments, which means my cash flow goes up. So the amount left over at the end of the month is higher, right? So by doing that, I've eliminated all my payments. I have more money left over at the end of the month, and that money, because I'm keeping the money in the HELOC, that money automatically stays in the HELOC. So income comes in over the course of the month, expenses come out, but we don't have any more payments. So the difference there is your net debt decrease for the month. And then you get paid again and it goes down again, and you just get this stair-stepping effect. Here, I've got
Yeah, show us
some
your visual.
graphics that I can
And
share.
for those when I first listened to this, it was so I could not, my brain could not comprehend. I literally had to watch this training and look at the graphics over and over and over. And then it really wasn't until we were actually doing it ourselves that I was like, oh, that's how it works. So for those of you that as you're listening, you're like, okay, my brain is fried. I have no idea what in the world you're talking about. We're going to have a link for you to a YouTube class that Mitch has about this, a webinar, and we'll send
Oh,
that to you
awesome.
so you can listen to it again and watch and see the graphics that he has there as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and this can be done on any line of credit. This example is a $15,000 credit card with $12,000 balance on it, right? And
So
this little family,
if you don't have a mortgage and you don't have access to a HELOC, you can do it
you
through
just want a credit
a
card.
credit
It's a line
card.
of credit.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So this whole family, when they got paid, instead of storing that money in the checking account, they stored it in the line of credit. It opened up the room, the spending ability, but while they weren't using the money, now it was doing an additional thing for them other than just sitting there waiting for them to use it. It actually lowered their debt, and what they're being charged on is what they're being charged interest on is actually a lower amount by their whole income that month. And then when they need the money, they use it out of where it's stored, that credit card, right? But because they had consolidated some of their debts into the credit card, they didn't have those debt payments anymore. And so there was a difference between what they were spending out of their budget and what they made. So that difference, we call it cash flow, is the net debt decrease for the month. And then this cool thing happens when you have a job or are active in a business, you get paid again, right? And so,
Yippee!
yeah, so the debt goes down again. And what happens is that difference, so no payments, so you have increased cash flow, less stress during the month, and uh, your debt balance is just deflated
Little
by
by little.
yeah, month after month, right? For
And for those
some,
of you that are listening on Spotify or Apple, if you go to the YouTube channel, to my YouTube channel, Denisha Christensen, and you look on this episode, he's actually showing, you'll see the screen on there. He's actually showing a visual of what this looks like, and that will help.
yeah. So the tradition is, I mean, this graphic kind of explains it, right? This is how we were traditionally taught. We make money, we store it in a checking account, right? And then we make our debt payments and we make our expenses and whatnot. Literally, all you have to change is just the checking account part. Just start using a line of credit. And if you're doing the credit card version, yeah, you might still have some debt payments that you need to pay out of that line of credit and some expenses. But what happens is the payment on this line of credit goes away because your income's coming into it. And so your net debt decrease is going to be higher than it was when you were making minimum payments on everything, right? Um, but for those of you who can do HELOCs and consolidate all your debt, all of your payments go away. And so that has a greater cash flow increase for you because you don't have any more monthly payments, right? So it's that simple.
Yeah.
Just change from using a checking account to store your income to using a line of credit. And the
And
rest
it's
of
so
that takes care
cool.
of itself.
And it's so cool because the people that we work with that we're teaching them how to do this, in most cases, what I've seen is it changes the time that they would pay off their house. It cuts it by, and I'm like 60 to 80%. So if they have like 7 years, it'll cut it down to like 5 or 6 or 7 years.
Yep.
If they have, 20, 25 years, it'll cut it down usually to 3 or 4 or 5, depending on their income, right? And so, for those of you listening, can you imagine if you have 25 years left on your mortgage and just simply by changing the way that you're banking, and we're not talking about not if you do any real estate investing, not if your business goes better, not if you make any more money, if everything were to stay exactly the same and you just simply, because the knowledge increases, your actions change, your behavior changes, you make a couple of these small steps, small changes. Now that time to pay off your house, you are debt free in 5, 6, 7 years instead of 20, 25, 30 years.
Even if you cut it in half, right? Even if it went from 30 to 15,
I mean, what would that do? Like
right?
it's just insane.
And what causes that time difference is the amount of money less that you're paying towards interest because of
Mm-hmm.
the effects of storing it in a simple interest account and then artificially deflating that balance each month by putting your income on top of it,
Yep.
right?
Yep. Yep.
You
Yep.
can't do that in a loan because in a loan, if you threw all your income at your mortgage, you couldn't get it back out to go buy
Gone.
groceries,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
you'd
It's
starve.
gone.
You
Dang
can't
it.
do that in a loan. It has to be
And a lot
lined
of
up.
people will make they're taught just make an extra payment. And I've had some people say, well, if I just make extra payments on my loan, how I have it, then it kind of does the same thing. I have it paid off in that amount of time. And I'm like, yes, but if something were to come up, you made that extra payment, and now something came up, and you're like, crap, we
Mhm.
could have used that extra money to bail us out of this hard situation. You don't have It's not an option anymore. And in a HELOC, it is.
Yeah. And it's a question of good, better, best, right? I'm not
Oh, for
knocking on
sure.
making extra payments. Like that's what you want to
Yeah,
do it.
do it.
But I
But
am
do it in
telling you
a
the math
HELOC.
is still a lot slower making extra payments. You end up
Yep.
shaving, uh, 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 a small amount of time off of your mortgage in comparison to what Velocity Banking can do. And with extra payments, your cash flow goes down by that extra payment. So you're actually more stressed each month
Yes, exactly.
than if you just were to do it this way, right? Your cash flow goes up
Yeah.
because you don't have any payments, let alone an extra payment, right? So it's just faster. Making double payments, paying
Yeah.
that mortgage down, it's a good thing. Velocity banking is a better thing.
Good, better, best. So
Mhm.
that's another question that I know I have come up with a lot of people, and I'm teaching and training on this is, well, yeah, but I'm not willing to put my house at risk. Not willing to put my house at risk in this process.
Your house is already at risk.
So speak
You want to
into
know what
that.
happens if you don't pay your HELOC? You get foreclosed on. Do you want to know what happens if you don't pay your mortgage?
You get foreclosed on.
You get foreclosed on. The risk is actually on that level the same, but with a HELOC, you can do something that, Denisha, imagine, heaven forbid, right? But we're going to talk a worst case scenario thing,
Okay.
okay?
Okay.
If you have a mortgage and all of a sudden something happened in your life, again, heaven forbid, hypothetical,
Right.
it's not going to happen, but something happened where you and Dave couldn't make income at the same time. Something happened. Neither of you could make income for 6 months. What would happen to your mortgage?
You can't pay it.
Assuming you don't have any savings, right? You can't pay it, and they're going to foreclose on you. Um, and there's nothing you can do. It relies on you making income. A mortgage requires you to make income. Now, you do need to at some point make income, and 6 months later you find a job and you're doing great, but they took your house, and that's awful. But if your home debt is in a HELOC and you're using Velocity Banking and opening up room, you're not being stupid with it. You're not maxing it out and going buying stupid stuff, but you're actually using it to pay down the debt. And something happens along the way and you can't make income for 6 months, well, then if you're not putting your income in, a payment will be due. But here's the beautiful thing. Take your HELOC card, drive down to the bank, walk up to the ATM, put your HELOC card in, pull out whatever the amount is of your monthly payment. It deducts from your HELOC and your debt goes up a little bit, yes. But you take that cash, you go walk it to the teller and say, here's my HELOC payment for the month. Your home just floated itself in an emergency. That makes this less risky than a mortgage.
I mean, that's just magical.
Now, again, that's not something you do every month,
Right.
right? You need that
But
income coming in. But if that does happen to you, you in that scenario, you have to do that for 6 months while you're working to get your feet back on the ground. Um, all you lose is 6 months of pay down time. That's all you lose. You don't lose
so
your
now
house,
instead of paying
you
it
lose your
off in
credit, your
6 years,
payments
you're
are made
paying
on
it off
time.
in, yeah. And now instead of paying it off in 6 years, you're paying it off in six and a half. Like, okay, big whoop, right? So
Yep.
I love, love, love this. And I love the idea of paying down your home. And we throw like when we train and educate on this, your car loan, your student mortgage loan, your medical loans, whatever, you throw all of that into the HELOC and it's all paid down. And still, with anything that you're adding to it, it's usually paid down in a fraction of the time. So it's like this magical tool and resource. So now you all know, now if you're listening, you have the education, your education just increased, and now the next step is for your behavior to change. Before we finish off with this and tell everybody they can connect with you, Mitch, let's talk about what happens or what else you can do with this HELOC. So we've talked mostly about paying off your home and your debt faster, which is amazing. But what other things can you do with a HELOC?
Yeah. So Maylee and I have coupled this financial strategy with other financial strategies that we know. And this is what we teach our students in the First Flip Challenge. We've coupled this strategy. So it's actually a compound strategy for us. We don't use it to pay our debt down to zero. That's not our goal. What we use it for is to open up room in our HELOC in a very expeditious way. Because when we have enough room opened up in our HELOC, we use that room as a down payment to leverage some of our other strategies that we've learned, like, for example, seller financed acquisitions of real estate. Uh, and we take that money we opened up in our HELOC down payment on buying a rental. That rental property now adds to my cash flow. It accelerates the velocity banking payment. It makes the next cycle even faster because my cash flow went up and contributes to my retirement. So we make money in our business and from our real estate, put it into our HELOC. HELOC goes down. We take that room, we go buy a rental, it goes back up. But now the next cycle of pushing it back down is faster because the cash flow is higher. We do it again, and every time it gets faster and faster and faster, we're just buying more and more rentals. And it's an incredible strategy for that.
Amazing. So you can use it to invest in your own real estate, and you could also use it to be equity partners in other people's real estate
Yep.
investments. We talk on that for a second, Mitch?
Yeah, absolutely. So, a lot of average people don't understand that they're wealthier than they think they are,
Hmm.
right? The average American uh, keeps their wealth in one of two places, their retirement account or equity in their home. And so if now we can access the equity in the home, we can start to use that to go do things that are going to build that wealth even more, right? It might be that you want to be the one to go out and buy a fix and flip and manage it and go do it and execute and make all the profit. Or maybe that doesn't sound fun to you. The money sounds fun, but the managing part doesn't sound fun. That's fine too. There's a place for you as well. Connect with someone like Denisha that is out actively, or me, or whoever that is out actively doing real estate successfully, and you can just be like, hey, could you put some of my money to work? Right? And if you can make a 10, 15, 20% rate of return and you're only being charged, 8% in your HELOC simple interest, you make a net, 10, 15%. So, it can be an incredible way to grow that through real estate without actually having to do any real estate. Just become a lender using the equity in your home, using the wealth you have, right? Velocity banking is great for that.
Yeah, and that's exactly when we first connected and started learning about all this. You extended the invitation. Do you want to jump into our education? Do you want to learn how to be an investor? And we were like, no, we don't want to do it ourselves, but like we'd love to partner up with you and do some be equity partners. And so we wired over 100 grand over to Mitch. Once those properties sell, we'll receive 20 grand back, 120 grand back, right?
Yep.
So we paid our grand total of interest that we paid on that is about 3,500. So even with paying the interest from the HELOC, we made $16,500 for simply doing a money transfer. That's our only role in that whole process. What could that do? Those of you who are listening, what could something like that do for you in your life? When education increases, behavior changes, and that's where you're going to have the results that you are wanting to have.
Yeah.
Absolutely magical.
And of
And
course, I'll give the disclaimer. Of course, we're not breaking the rules and raising
oh
money
yeah,
through the
completely
podcast, right?
moral,
What we're
legal, and
showing
ethical.
you is
Yeah,
educational. We're showing you what can be done
exactly.
with the wealth you weren't taught that you have.
There
And
you
that's
go.
just it. You just weren't taught these things, right? That doesn't mean they don't exist. That doesn't mean that they're not amazing. There's obviously people out there doing way better than most other people, and it's because they're not applying average people skills. They're not applying average people techniques. They've found a better way.
Yes. Yeah. And another disclaimer is please don't go out and try and do this yourself. You need to get educated. We have, an 8-hour class. This was like a drop in the bucket. I'm going to send you Mitch's 90-minute webinar that's
The
going to give you
tease.
another drop. What's that?
This is really just a tease.
Yeah. We're going to send you Mitch's webinar that will give you another a little bit of information, but really you need to learn how this all works so that your risk is abated. You have the knowledge, you have the education, you know how to go out and do this in the right way. Super, super important. Before we finish up, Mitch, one more thing I wanted to touch on. You said something, I can't remember what you're talking about now, but you said that your 8% HELOC. And again, I think we need a reminder for people because they're going, 8% HELOC, I have a 3% mortgage on my home. Why would I
Fahrenheit or
get an
Celsius?
8% HELOC? Exactly, right?
Yeah.
Fahrenheit and Celsius, a
You can't compare them straight
3%.
across.
So a 3% mortgage is actually akin to what in a line of credit?
Oh gosh, it can be double, triple, quadruple what you actually borrowed, which is not 3% if you if you look at it, right? But amortized interest is calculated differently.
So remember that. Remember that because that's a continual rebuttal that I always get. But
Yep.
why would I do that? And I'm like, okay, again, we go back to Fahrenheit and Celsius.
Here's the basics of it. Average person makes banking decisions based on interest rates. The wealthy person makes decisions based on cash flow.
There you go. Your cash flow each month, which is what the velocity banking creates for you, is cash flow. Love it, love it. Absolutely magical. This one thing changed my life, completely changed my life. So super, super grateful. Thank you for being on here, Mitch. Um, how can they connect with you?
Oh gosh, Denisha, through you. Through you. I mean, we've
Okay.
become business partners, so just reach out to Denisha. You will get to me very quickly through Denisha.
I'm happy to connect you with Mitch. Reach out to me. We'll set up a quick one-on-one to meet Mitch and ask him all your questions. We'll send you the YouTube webinar that will give a little bit more training about this. Mitch is also coming to teach on this exact same concept for our Creating Her Empire event on July 28th. We meet in person, our Creating Her Empire ladies in Salt Lake, Utah County, somewhere in Utah. And this month on July 28th, Mitch is going to be our guest speaker coming and teaching on this exact principle. So come on July 28th, come meet him. And do you want to talk a little bit? Do you want to tell him about your first flip challenge, Mitch?
Oh, the
Your
first flip
hat?
challenge is
Yes,
awesome.
yes,
Yeah,
yes.
that's something that my wife Maylee and I do together, and it's become, we wanted in our business the one thing we wanted to do was change people's lives, because we are so blessed from the things that we have learned throughout the years, and it's really created some incredible opportunity, and given us some time freedom and some financial freedom. And all of that is thanks to learning better financial strategies and learning how to do real estate investing. And so, what we do for our business is we teach other people how to go have similar success. Um,
Yay!
you know, and so the first flip challenge is designed to help you get into your first real estate deal, regardless of any of your excuses that you're telling yourself right now. Like, I don't have the money, I don't have the time. Neither did I, right? I was working a
Neither
full-time
did
job
we.
making not enough money. Neither did Denisha. But what the first flip challenge is designed to do is take an average person and get them into their first real estate investment in 90 days. You
It's
want more
amazing.
information, reach out to Denisha. It is killer and it
It's
works.
amazing.
We're changing
We
lives.
we did the spring winter season and got into our first property, and now we're doing the second season, the summer season, and we just went under contract for 2 more properties. Our
Yep.
goal is to 210 this year, and that's how we're going to do it, is through the first flip challenge. So can't recommend it enough. If this is something that you're thinking about at all, of the whole idea of real estate investing, and thought that maybe now is not the time, or you don't have the time or the money or the resources, we want to suggest that maybe you do, and maybe it is the right time. And we'd love to help you get that figured out. So thank you so much for being on the podcast today. I think you and Maylee both are such beautiful examples of my whole point of this podcast of how this ends, right? Just keep doing the things, keep trusting, keep getting education, keep up leveling in the way that feels best for you. in the right time, in the right way. And I mean, you guys have built the most beautiful life together, you and your kids and your home and just the what you do, the work that you do, being able to do it on your own time frame and live life the way that you want. And that's just amazing.
Yep. It is
So
incredible. I'm very blessed.
yes,
Thank
we
you,
are.
Demetria.
Yes, we are. You're welcome. Thank you so much for being here. We'll talk to you all soon and have a great day. Bye.